Earlier in this newscast, we detailed some of the challenges facing both the consumers and providers of energy. Oklahoma was spared much of the suffering that was experienced in our neighboring state of Texas. But what about the next Arctic blast or crippling heat wave? Joining Susan Cadot for this week's in-depth discussion, representatives from our state's largest energy producers.
Thank you, Rich. Yes, this is information all of Oklahoma needs, especially after recent weather events that really impacted electricity for everyone. And we have a distinguished panel here to help us sort it all out and maybe teach me a few things along the way. First, I'd like to introduce Stan Whiteford, who is the communications manager for the Public Service Company of Oklahoma, otherwise known as PSO. And that is one of the largest distributors of wind energy in the state. We also have Chris Myers, who is the general manager of the Oklahoma Association of Electric Cooperatives. Brian Alford is the Director of Public Affairs for OG&E, and Lanny Nickel is the Executive Vice President of the Southwest Power Pool. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
All right,
Thank you.
I'd like to begin by, let's start with Brian. How does electricity get to our homes?
Well, it sounds very easy on paper, but it's not. You start at a generation source in Oklahoma that is natural gas, it's coal, and it's renewables, solar and wind. Those facilities generate electricity. They're sent over a high voltage transmission system to different parts of our state. And from there, it's distributed within our communities and ultimately to the end consumer. That's a very high level, but in a nutshell, that's how it works.
So there are many organizations along the way who help that. So Brian, I want to start with you. Explain where OG&E is along the path to getting electricity to customers.
Well, in Oklahoma, we continue to be regulated. And so we have power plants that generate the electricity. We use a mix of fuels, which was very beneficial for us over the last week. And those fuels include natural gas and coal. And we also have renewable energy, wind and solar. And, like Stan at PSO and Chris at the co-ops, we all generate our electricity. We have our high voltage transmission system, and we have a distribution system. And we all rely on the Southwest Power Pool to help coordinate that, not only in Oklahoma, but across the region. I think of SPP as air traffic control. They keep supply and demand in balance and manage the flow on multiple fronts. And that's generally how it works.
Great. On that note, Lanny, we kind of got to know Southwest Power Pool recently here in Oklahoma. You guys are just invisible behind the scenes, making everything work. Explain what your organization does.
Southwest Power Pool, as Brian mentioned, really serves a footprint that expands across all our parts of 14 states in the central part of America. We do act as really air traffic control for the power grid. And in doing this, what we make sure happens is that energy can be delivered from the generating plants all the way to the substations that are owned and operated by the utilities for their purposes of then supplying that power to your homes. We make sure that energy is balanced between supply and demand at all times. And in doing this on a continuous basis, we make sure that the transmission system is operated in a way that's reliable and certainly does its part in this huge, most complicated machine called the electric power grid that's ever been built.
Chris, what does the cooperative do? And I know for our viewers, this is a lot in getting the foundation set, but I think we need to have the foundation set to understand how it all works and how it affects us. So Chris, what does the cooperative do?
So the electric cooperatives primarily serve the rural parts of the state. The cooperatives serve very few communities. So what we have are 27 local distribution cooperatives that serve the consumer. We also have 3 generation and transmission cooperatives who work on their behalf. So those 3 generation and transmission cooperatives are supplying the power to the Southwest Power Pool on their behalf. They have to have, just like every utility, enough generation to serve their own load and make that available to the Southwest Power Pool, who then decides what units need to run based on economics and reliability. So we actually have three entities that work on an hourly basis, continuous basis, 24/7 with the Southwest Power Pool to ensure that that balance is met.
And Stan, I saved you for last because wind energy is so interesting to everyone. Let's talk about, where does wind energy come in to play here, and how much of a factor is it when energy is desperately needed in times of climate crisis?
We are set up much in the same way as Brian described. We are a fully integrated electric utility, so we generate power from power plants, and then we put that energy onto our grid and deliver it to our customers. So along with the wind energy that you mentioned, we also have significant traditional resources. We have 7 other power plants, we have that are mostly fueled by natural gas, 1 coal unit still, but we have 7 different power plants. And then we have those wind resources as well. We've been involved in wind energy since back in 2005, and we distribute over 1,100 megawatts of energy, of wind energy on our system as well. So wind energy is one factor of all the energy that
we got introduced to rolling blackouts here in Oklahoma over the winter storm that just happened. We're not used to those. I think I hear about them in the summer. So I'll let any of you take up to explain what a rolling blackout is. What I want to know is what it is and why do we do it?
So the term rolling blackouts it is used to describe an occurrence on the system where the reliability situation has got to a point where we have to take action in order to protect the grid from really taking over and doing something that none of us want to see, which is to cascade in an uncontrolled fashion. Which ultimately has a much longer, much deeper impact to many, many more customers than if we can do something on our own in a controlled fashion. So that controlled action that we take is really what you're referring to. We actually refer to that as a controlled interruption of service. We do that, again, to protect against further, much more consequential events from occurring. And SPP and its role as, quote, air traffic controller for the power grid will issue instructions to its utilities in Oklahoma that consist of OG&E, PSO, the Cooperatives, Grand River Dam Authority, and several municipalities across the state. We will ask them to interrupt a certain amount of service, and then they exercise their own emergency response plans to achieve that in a way that is pursuant to their knowledge of their systems and interrupting the customers on a rotating fashion in a very responsible way.
Did you get much pushback or complaints from customers? Because as I understand it, most lost power for maybe 30 minutes or an hour. So was there much of a problem there?
I would say that there was not. I mean, I want to give the consumers a lot of credit for turning thermostats down, conserving, because that was helpful. It may not seem like much individually, but when you add it together, it really was helpful. And we only had these controlled outages 2 mornings. One of them was for 50 minutes. And the next day there was a 3-hour period, which I know we kind of rotated that among folks. So, and my understanding is only about 1.5% of the folks were impacted by that on the first day and 6.5% on the second. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that while this has never happened in the SPP before, you got to give them credit, and you got to give all the utilities credit for having a plan to minimize the impact during these really dangerously cold temperatures. No one can really afford to be out very long. And so while they got a lot of talk, I think a lot of credit goes to the utility the generators and the SPP for managing that as well as they did.
But if we heard one thing from our customers, it was like, gosh, you didn't give us any time. And I think it's important to note how quickly these things develop. And, Lanny and his team there at the Southwest Power Pool, they're watching this situation minute by minute, second by second. And I think he shared with us at one point, they were doing 1,000 contingencies every 4 minutes. When they look at a supply demand imbalance that's getting a little bit out of sequence, they call us and say, look, we need you to reduce your demand. And that is, they expect us to do that on an immediate basis. We don't have 5, 10, 30 minutes to let our customers know. We have to take that action immediately, because were we not taking these actions immediately, it could lead to catastrophic outcomes.
Why don't we see this in the summer? I mean, I would think the demand in the summer in Oklahoma, it gets pretty darn hot. I think the demand would be huge.
Yes, we are what's called a summer peaking utility. That's when we have our highest demand. But this was extremely high demand for the winter. Now, let me just say, I've had some of our folks do some quick back of the envelope type of calculations. And even at our peak during this time in which people were using more energy than they typically do during the winter time, it still was not equal to what we would see in the summer peak. So again, this really had nothing to do with the situation involving the grid or the reliability of the grid. The wires, the substations, all of those things held up perfectly. This was strictly an issue of getting the fuel supplies to the power plant so that they could get the electricity onto the grid. So that's not a situation that we would typically see in the summertime either. So this was very unique, and in, just as Brian mentioned, first time in our 108-year history that we ever interrupted service to any customers due to a generating capacity shortage.
Lanny, are plans underway? Are you guys talking about how to keep this from happening in future if this comes about again during a winter snow event?
We absolutely will evaluate, assess, do a postmortem analysis, as we like to refer to it, after we experience these kinds of events. We've experienced events, nothing like this, but we've experienced events in the past where we've done exactly that. We've done a postmortem analysis. We include our stakeholders, our members, our regulators in those discussions, because we are a learning organization and we very much want to learn from this event. I believe we made the best out of a bad situation. I think the utilities, our ratepayers, our customers worked very well with us to make that happen in a way that was as least disruptive as possible. But having said that, there are going to be opportunities to learn, and we will do that.
Once we get past the need for the electricity and the crisis is over, now we're all looking at what kind of bills are we going to get. Chris, help me out here. Are people going to see like $17,000 bill down in Texas? What's going to happen to Oklahomans?
Well, first of all, the retail market in Texas is nothing like Oklahoma's. So I don't think we can make a comparison to what is happening in Texas. But the bills will be higher. Your February bills will be higher because you used more energy. I mean, when it gets super cold or super hot, you just consume more energy. So I think the biggest impact on the bills that'll be showing up soon will be the fact that you consumed more energy, more kilowatt hours, more natural gas.
Here in Oklahoma, we have a very formal process. We are not allowed to change our prices at all, just arbitrarily. We must go to the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and file for any changes in our prices at all, whether that's our regular rates or whether that's the fuel cost component. And that's why you have heard many times, and particularly Energy Secretary Wagner elaborate on this with great clarity the other day in the governor's news conference, that is the reason that we should not expect electric customers to see significantly larger bills this time. The only reason they would see a larger bill is because they used more electricity than they had in the previous month, but not due to any change of prices.
Well, I can't believe we have gone over our time. I didn't get to ask some questions that I wanted to, but I would like to ask each of you, is there something you would like the public to know about this issue that they just don't understand, or that you think would maybe give them a little bit of relaxation or ease about their upcoming bills?
I would say that Oklahomans need to feel good about how our grid performed, how their respective utilities performed. I think they need to feel good about how well the Southwest Power Pool did in managing this situation on behalf of the state and 13 others in the region. I think we came out of this much better than many of our neighbors, and I think it speaks to the preparedness that we've all shown and demonstrated. And and again, I think the last add I would have is that we are going to work tirelessly, as Stan said, with the commission to help minimize the impact of the cost of what we saw last week.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing, and that is one of the biggest reasons why this event didn't contribute even more pain to customers in Oklahoma and across our 14-state region was because our member utilities saw the value and the benefit in coordinating across a large 14-state region. No single utility, or for that matter, no single state, by virtue of their participation in SPP, will ever have to face crises like the one we just faced alone. And I think that value was very much manifested. I think it will continue to be. I know it will be, and I expect that we will get better as a result of what we learned out of this event.
And also know that if there are any issues with higher than normal bills, again, we don't expect exorbitant bills at all, but we've extended all those type of pay arrangements that we put into place with the pandemic just to help ease that burden on our customers. So we're going to continue to do that and work with our customers. And our commitment is to also continue to working with all the regulators throughout the state to address any issues that may have come up.
And Chris?
This event has brought the electric grid to everyone's attention. And it is a very complex, very dynamic grid that is extremely reliable. And, I think we ought to recognize those that work every day, 24/7, whether it's a cold day, hot day, or a mild day, right, all day, all night, Christmas morning, Easter morning, watching the load, keeping generation balanced. And, we all take it for granted, and that's fine. But we welcome anyone who'd like to look under the hood and really understand how it works.
Well, you guys all gave us a chance to look under the hood today. I want to thank you for your time and for the information. I was working really hard to try to follow everything, but it was good for me. I learned a lot. Thank you all for keeping the lights on, and thank you all for joining us.
Susan, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.